In the quiet little village of Willowbrook, life moved at a pace that matched the rhythm of nature. Nestled between rolling green hills and thick forests, this was a place where people knew each other by name and everyone had a story to tell. Among them lived a young woman who would soon become the talk of the town, not because she sought fame, but because destiny decided to knock on her door in the most unexpected way. Her name was Clara, and she wasn't your typical small-town girl. Sure, she wore simple clothes covered in dust from working the fields. And yes, her hands were calloused from years of helping her father on their modest farm. But there was something about Clara that set her apart, a spark of curiosity, a hunger for adventure, even if it only existed in the pages of books borrowed from the local library. While others saw farming as a lifelong duty, Clara often dreamed of exploring beyond the horizon, imagining what secrets lay hidden in the woods surrounding Willowbrook. One crisp autumn morning, everything changed. The air carried the scent of fallen leaves, and the sun cast long golden shadows across the land. Clara was busy feeding the animals when she noticed something unusual. Buttercup, their fattest and cleverest pig, was nowhere to be found. Now losing a pig might not sound like a big deal, but anyone who knew Buttercup understood just how much trouble she could get into. This wasn't the first time she'd escaped. Once, she wandered all the way to Mrs. Thompson's vegetable patch, leaving chaos in her wake. Clara sighed, grabbed an apple from the kitchen, and set off after her. Buttercup was quick, darting through the rows of corn stalks with surprising agility. Clara followed, her boots crunching against the dry earth as she called out, "Buttercup, come back here." But the pig paid no attention, disappearing behind the barn and heading straight toward the creek. By now, Clara was starting to feel frustrated. Chasing Buttercup wasn't exactly how she'd planned to spend her morning, especially since there was still so much work to do on the farm. Still, she couldn't let the stubborn sow roam free. It wouldn't end well. The chase led Clara further than she had ever gone before. Past the orchard, where apples hung heavy on the branches, and over the rickety wooden bridge that spanned the creek. Her heart raced as she pushed through the underbrush, following the trail of upturned leaves and muddy hoofprints. Finally, she reached the edge of the woods, a part of Willowbrook she rarely ventured into. Everyone in town talked about these woods, whispering stories of strange noises and unexplained disappearances. Some said they were haunted, while others claimed wild beasts lurked within. Clara didn't believe in such tales, but standing there at the forest's edge, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something unknown. And then she saw it, a narrow opening in the hillside, partially hidden by thick vines. Buttercup must have squeezed through, judging by the broken stems and fresh tracks leading inside. Clara hesitated for a moment, glancing back toward the safety of the farm. She could always turn around, go home, and hope someone else found the runaway pig. But something about the cave pulled at her curiosity. It wasn't just about catching Buttercup anymore. It was about finding out what lay beyond that shadowy entrance. Taking a deep breath, Clara stepped inside. The sunlight faded quickly, replaced by the dim glow of moss clinging to the damp walls. The air smelled earthy, tinged with a faint metallic tang of minerals. Her footsteps echoed softly as she moved deeper, calling out for Buttercup every few seconds. At first, the cave seemed ordinary enough, just another hollow in the hillside. But the farther she went, the stranger things became. The walls began to change, marked with symbols etched into the stone. They weren't random scratches or natural formations. These were deliberate carvings, intricate patterns that spiraled and looped in ways that made no sense to Clara. And yet, they felt familiar, as though they stirred some ancient memory buried deep within her. Even more puzzling was the fact that the symbols glowed faintly, pulsating like fireflies trapped in amber. Clara reached out to touch one, half expecting it to burn her skin. But it remained cool to the touch. As she continued onward, the tunnel widened into a vast chamber unlike anything she'd ever seen. Crystals jutted out from the ceiling and floor, refracting the faint light into a kaleidoscope of colors. In the center of the room stood a pedestal carved from dark rock, its surface smooth and polished. On top of it rested an object that took Clara's breath away, a golden orb encrusted with shimmering gemstones. It looked otherworldly, almost too beautiful to exist in this world. The orb seemed alive, its surface swirling with hues that shifted and danced like liquid sunlight. Clara froze, unsure whether to approach or run. Something about the orb drew her closer, filling her with both awe and unease. As she stepped nearer, Buttercup snorted nearby, breaking the spell. The pig was rooting around carelessly, oblivious to the significance of what they'd stumbled upon. Clara knelt beside her, trying to calm her racing thoughts. What was this place? Who or what had created it? And why did it feel like the orb was calling to her? Before she could answer those questions, the ground beneath her feet trembled slightly. A voice, deep and resonant, filled the cavern not aloud, but directly in her mind. "Who dares awaken me?" it asked, sending shivers down her spine. Clara's eyes widened as the orb began to glow brighter, illuminating the entire cave. Whatever was about to happen next, she realized, would change her life forever. The voice echoed in Clara's mind again, deeper this time, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "Who dares awaken me?" it asked, each word resonating with a weight that felt older than the hills themselves. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the glowing orb on the pedestal. For a moment, she thought about running, turning around, and sprinting out of the cave as fast as her legs could carry her. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the pull of the orb, or maybe it was the sense that whatever was happening here was bigger than just her. Whatever it was, she stayed rooted to the spot. The trembling grew stronger, and the light from the orb intensified, casting dancing shadows across the crystal-lined walls of the cavern. Buttercup, who had been happily snuffling around nearby, suddenly froze, her ears perked up as if sensing danger. Clara reached out instinctively to calm the pig, but her attention remained fixed on the orb. Slowly, hesitantly, she took another step forward. I didn't mean to wake anything," Clara stammered, unsure whether to speak aloud or keep her thoughts to herself. "I'm just looking for my pig." There was a pause of silence so heavy it felt like the cave itself was holding its breath. Then the voice responded, "Your pig? A curious creature indeed. Yet you have stumbled upon something far greater than either of you can comprehend." Before Clara could process what that meant, the air around her shifted. It wasn't cold or hot. It was charged like the moments before a storm breaks. The golden orb began to shimmer even more brightly, and then, without warning, a figure emerged from within its swirling depths. At first, it was just a blur of light, indistinct and shapeless. But as it solidified, Clara realized it wasn't human, or at least not entirely. The being was tall and cloaked in a luminous glow that made it hard to look at directly. Its form seemed to shift constantly, blending features of man and nature into something otherworldly. Leaves swirled faintly around its head like a crown, and its eyes glowed with an ancient wisdom that made Clara feel both insignificant and strangely important. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. "I am Arender," the figure said, its voice softer now but still commanding. "Guardian of this land since time immemorial. Long ago, your kind drove me into hiding, fearing what they did not understand. Now, through you, fate has brought me back." Clara blinked, struggling to wrap her mind around what she was hearing. This wasn't some storybook tale. This was real. Standing right in front of her was a being straight out of legend, speaking as though he'd been waiting centuries for this exact moment. What do you mean, guardian? She finally managed to ask, her voice trembling slightly. And why are you talking to me? Arundel tilted his head, studying her with those piercing eyes. The orb you see is no ordinary object, he explained. It holds fragments of the Earth's essence, its life force, its balance. With it, I once protected these lands from harm. Without it, chaos takes root. Clara glanced at the orb again, feeling a mixture of awe and unease. But why does it glow like that? And why am I here? I'm just a farmer's daughter. I don't know anything about protecting lands or fighting chaos. You are here because you chose to enter this cave, Arundel replied. Because you dared to follow where others would turn away. That courage marks you as someone worthy of bearing a fragment of this power? A fragment of power? Clara's mind raced. Was he saying she was supposed to take part of the orb with her? Leave the cave and somehow use it to protect Willowbrook? It sounded impossible, yet the sincerity in Arundel's tone made it hard to dismiss. Still, doubt lingered in her mind. What happens if I say no? She asked cautiously. What if I walk out of here and pretend none of this ever happened? Arundel's expression darkened slightly, though not in anger. You may leave if you wish, he said. But know this, the corruption spreading across these lands will not wait. Already, it creeps closer to your village, poisoning the soil and tainting the hearts of men. If left unchecked, it will consume everything you. Hold, dear. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. Corruption? Poisoning the soil? She thought back to the strange blight that had affected their crops last season, the way the plants wilted overnight, no matter how much care they gave them. Could that have been connected to what Arundel was describing? The idea was terrifying, but also oddly familiar, as if deep down she'd always known something was wrong. And if I stay? She asked quietly. If I agree to help you, what then? Arundel raised one hand, and a shard of the orb detached itself, floating gently toward Clara. Unlike the rest of the orb, this piece was smaller, more manageable, and it pulsed with a warm, inviting light. This talisman will serve as your guide, he explained. It will grant you strength when needed and warn you of danger. But remember, great power comes with great responsibility. You must learn to wield it wisely or risk losing yourself to its influence. Clara hesitated, staring at the shard hovering inches from her fingertips. Part of her wanted to snatch it immediately, driven by a mix of excitement and duty. Another part screamed at her to run, to leave this cave and never look back. In the end, it was the image of her father's tired face that tipped the scales. How many times had he struggled to save their farm from ruin? How many nights had she lain awake, worrying about the future of their livelihood? If there was even a chance she could make things better, not just for her family, but for everyone in Willowbrook, how could she refuse? Taking a deep breath, Clara reached out and grasped the shard. The moment her fingers closed around it, warmth surged through her body, filling her with a sense of purpose unlike anything she'd ever experienced. The cave seemed to brighten momentarily, and Buttercup let out a contented oink, as if sensing the change too. You have made the right choice, Arundel said, his voice softer now, almost kind. But know this, the path ahead will not be easy. There are forces at work that seek to claim the orb's power for themselves. Trust few and rely on your instincts. Clara nodded, clutching the talisman tightly. I'll do my best. She promised. But what exactly am I supposed to do next? Arundel gestured toward the entrance of the cave. Return to your village. Watch for signs of imbalance, sickly crops, unnatural storms, whispers of greed among your neighbors. These are symptoms of the corruption spreading beneath your feet. When the time comes, I will guide you further. With that, the glowing figure began to fade, dissolving back into the orb until only the pulsating symbols on the walls remained. The cavern fell silent once more, save for the sound of Buttercup snuffling around. Clara stood there for a moment, letting everything sink in. She had entered the cave chasing a runaway pig, and now she was leaving with a mission that felt far beyond her understanding. Yet as she turned to go, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. "Come on, Buttercup," she said softly, giving the pig a gentle nudge. "Let's get home." Clara woke the next morning with a heaviness in her chest, the kind that comes from carrying secrets too big for one person to bear. The talisman rested on the wooden table beside her bed, its faint glow casting soft shadows on the walls. She stared at it for a moment, wondering how something so small could hold such immense power and responsibility. Outside, the rooster crowed, signaling the start of another day, but Clara knew this wouldn't be like any other. Not anymore. The first thing she did was check the fields. Overnight, more patches of the dark moss had spread, creeping closer. To the village. It wasn't just the farm now. It was everywhere. Clara moved quickly, using the talisman to burn away the corruption before anyone else noticed. But it was getting harder. The moss resisted her efforts, pulsing angrily as if it knew she was trying to destroy it. Each time she touched the talisman. To the ground, a wave of dizziness washed over her, leaving her breathless and weak. Whatever this stuff was, it wasn't just some harmless plant, it was alive. And it didn't want to go quietly. By mid-morning, Clara decided she needed help. She couldn't keep doing this alone. Her father was busy fixing the roof, so she headed into town instead, hoping to find someone who might believe her without asking too many questions. She ended up at Mrs. Thompson's bakery, where the old woman was kneading dough behind the counter. Mrs. Thompson had always been kind to Clara, offering her fresh bread or a listening ear when things got tough. If anyone would understand, it was her double quotes Mrs. Thompson. Clara began hesitantly. "Can I talk to you about something? Something strange?" The older woman wiped her hands on her apron and nodded. "Of course, dear. What's troubling you?" Clara glanced around to make sure no one else was listening, then leaned in closer. "There's something wrong with the land. Patches of moss are spreading all over, and they're killing the crops. I've tried to stop them, but it's getting worse. And there are these whispers, like voices coming from the moss." Mrs. Thompson frowned, clearly skeptical. "Whispers? Are you feeling all right, Clara? Maybe you've been working too hard." "I know it sounds crazy," Clara admitted, lowering her voice even further. "But it's real. I've seen it. And I think it's connected to something bigger. Something dangerous." To her surprise, Mrs. Thompson didn't dismiss her outright. Instead, she placed a comforting hand on Clara's shoulder. "I may not understand everything you're saying, but I trust you. If you say something's wrong, then I believe you. Just promise me you'll be careful." Clara nodded, grateful for the small measure of support. "I will, thank you." Later that afternoon, Clara ran into Victor again. He was standing near the edge of the forest, inspecting one of the moss patches she hadn't reached yet. When he saw her approaching, he smiled a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ah, Clara," he said smoothly. "Out here investigating our little mystery?" "It's not a mystery," Clara replied, keeping her tone neutral. "It's a problem, one that needs solving." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Indeed. Tell me, have you found anything interesting during your investigations?" Clara hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Just that it's spreading faster than I expected. And it's not normal moss. It's toxic." "Fascinating," Victor murmured, crouching down to examine the patch more closely, almost as if it's feeding off the land itself. "Do you suppose it could be linked to some kind of ancient magic?" His words caught her off guard. How did he know to ask that? Was he guessing, or did he already suspect the truth? Clara forced herself to stay calm. Magic isn't real, she said. Flatly. This is just nature gone wrong. Victor chuckled, standing back up. Nature doesn't behave this way unless provoked. Someone or something has disturbed the balance. Wouldn't you agree? Before Clara could respond, a loud crack echoed through the air. Both of them turned to see a group of villagers running toward them, shouting and pointing at the sky. Clara followed their gaze and felt her stomach drop. Dark clouds were gathering above the forest, swirling unnaturally fast. Lightning flashed within the storm, illuminating the trees below in eerie bursts of light. It wasn't natural, it couldn't be. What is that? Victor asked, his voice tinged with both awe and unease. Clara didn't answer. She was too busy clutching the talisman, which had begun to glow brighter than ever before. Arrender's voice filled her mind, urgent and commanding. The corruption is growing stronger. You must act quickly, or it will consume everything. Without thinking, Clara took off toward the forest, ignoring Victor's calls behind her. She knew exactly where she needed to go: the cave. Something inside told her that was where the source of the corruption lay. The storm raged above her as she pushed through the underbrush, her heart pounding in time with the thunder. Buttercup appeared suddenly, trotting alongside her as if sensing her urgency. When they reached the cave entrance, Clara stopped short. The symbols etched into the walls were glowing fiercely now, pulsating with a rhythm that matched the storm outside. Inside, the golden orb sat on its pedestal, but it looked different, somehow dimmer, weaker. As Clara stepped closer, she realized why. Cracks were forming along its surface, tiny fractures spreading like spiderwebs. No, she whispered, reaching out to touch it. The moment her fingers brushed against the orb, pain shot through her arm and she stumbled backward. The whispers returned, louder this time, overlapping each other until they formed a single deafening roar. You cannot stop us, they hissed. We will rise. Clara fell to her knees, clutching the talisman tightly. Arrender! She shouted, her voice breaking. Help me! For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air shimmered and Arrender materialized before her, his form flickering like candlelight in the wind. The corruption has taken root within the orb itself, he said grimly. If it shatters completely, the balance will collapse. What do I do? Clara cried, tears streaming down her face. How do I fix this? Arrender knelt beside her, placing a translucent hand on her shoulder. You must sacrifice the talisman. Only its essence can seal the corruption away permanently. But if I lose the talisman, I won't have any protection. Clara protested. I won't be able to fight anymore. You won't need to, Arrender assured her. The land will remember your bravery. Trust in yourself and in those who stand with you. Clara hesitated, staring at the talisman in her hand. It had become a part of her, a symbol of everything she'd fought for, but she knew Arrender was right. There was no other way. Taking a deep breath, she placed the talisman on the pedestal beside the orb. A brilliant flash of light erupted, engulfing the entire cave. The whispers ceased, replaced by a profound silence. When the light faded, the orb was whole again, its surface smooth and unblemished. The storm outside had dissipated, leaving only clear skies and fresh air. Clara slumped to the ground, exhausted but relieved. She had done it. Against all odds, she had saved Willowbrook Dot. As she made her way back to the village, Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. The talisman was gone, but its legacy lived on in the healthy fields, in the smiles of the villagers, and in the knowledge that she had faced her fears and emerged stronger. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. When Clara stepped out of the cave, the world outside seemed different somehow. The sunlight filtering through the trees felt sharper, the rustling leaves louder, and even the earth beneath her boots seemed to hum with energy. She clutched the talisman tightly in her hand, its warmth a constant reminder of the weight now resting on her shoulders. Buttercup trotted ahead, oblivious to the monumental shift that had just occurred. To the pig, it was just another day of exploration. To Clara, it was the start of something she couldn't fully comprehend. The walk back to the farm was quiet, but Clara's mind buzzed with questions. What did Arender mean by corruption? How could she possibly protect Willowbrook when she barely understood what she was up against? And why had fate chosen her, an ordinary farmer's daughter, to carry such a burden? Each step brought her closer to home, yet further away from the life she once knew. By the time she reached the edge of their property, Clara realized she couldn't keep this secret to herself forever. Her father would notice the change in her sooner or later. But how do you tell someone that you've been entrusted with an ancient artifact meant to save the world? Her father was in the barn when she returned, mending a broken fence post. He looked up as she approached, his brow furrowing at the sight of her dusty clothes and the determined set of her jaw. "Where have you been?" he asked, brushing sawdust off his hands. "I've been looking for you and Buttercup, too." Clara hesitated, glancing down at the talisman hidden in her pocket. Telling him the truth felt impossible, so instead she offered a half-truth. "Buttercup ran off into the woods," she said. "It took me a while to find her." Her father grunted, clearly unconvinced but too tired to press further. "Well, don't let it happen again. We can't afford to lose any more livestock, not with winter coming." Winter, the word, sent a shiver down Clara's spine, though not because of the cold. If Arender was right about the corruption spreading, then winter might bring challenges far worse than frostbitten crops. For now, though, all she could do was focus on the tasks in front of her: feeding the chickens, fixing the plow, gathering firewood. Normal chores to distract herself from the enormity of what lay ahead. The first sign of trouble came 2 days later. Clara woke to find the fields surrounding their farm covered in patches of dark, slimy moss. It hadn't been there the night before, at least she was certain of it. At first glance, it looked harmless enough, like something left behind by damp weather. But as she knelt to examine it, she noticed the plants nearby were wilting, their leaves turning brittle and gray. Even stranger, the moss seemed to pulse faintly. As if alive, she pulled the talisman from her pocket instinctively, and to her surprise, it began to glow softly, reacting to whatever was happening. A voice not Arender's this time, but a low, guttural whisper filled her mind. "Feed, grow." It hissed, sending a chill down her spine. Without thinking, Clara touched the talisman to the moss, and a surge of light erupted from it, dissolving the patch into nothingness. The plants around it immediately perked up, their vibrant green returning almost instantly. Breathing heavily, Clara stood and scanned the horizon. More patches dotted the landscape, creeping toward the village, like shadows stretching across the land. This wasn't random, it was deliberate. Something was poisoning Willowbrook, and it was moving fast. Over the next few days, Clara worked tirelessly to contain the spread. Armed with the talisman, she ventured into the fields at dawn and dusk, purging the moss wherever it appeared. Each encounter left her drained, both physically and emotionally. The whispers grew louder each time, taunting her, testing her resolve. "You're weak," they sneered. "You'll fail." But Clara refused to give in. She thought of her father, of the villagers who relied on the harvest to survive, and pushed forward. Word of the strange phenomenon eventually reached the townsfolk. Farmers began noticing similar patches appearing on their own land, and soon, everyone was talking about it. Some blamed bad weather, others blamed pests, but no one suspected the truth that something darker was at play. Clara kept quiet, knowing that revealing the talisman or Arunder's warning would only cause panic. Instead, she offered practical advice. Burn the affected areas, avoid touching the moss directly, and report any unusual activity to her immediately. Despite her efforts, skepticism lingered. Old Mr. Hargrove, the town's self-proclaimed expert on everything, scoffed at Clara's suggestions. "Moss doesn't just appear overnight," he muttered during a meeting at the local inn. "And burning it? That's nonsense. You're scaring people for no reason." Clara bit her tongue, resisting the urge to argue. She knew the truth, but proving it to stubborn minds like Mr. Hargrove's felt futile. Still, she couldn't afford to waste time convincing doubters, not when every second counted. Things took a turn when strangers arrived in Willowbrook. They came in a caravan of worn-out wagons, claiming to be scholars interested in local folklore. One of them, a tall man with sharp features and an even sharper gaze, introduced himself as Victor. He spoke smoothly, charming the villagers with tales of distant lands and ancient relics. Clara didn't trust him from the start. There was something calculating in his eyes, something predatory. Victor quickly turned his attention to Clara, asking pointed questions about the moss and the measures she'd taken to combat it. "You seem remarkably knowledgeable for a farmer's daughter," he remarked one evening, cornering her near the market stalls. "Almost as if you've seen something the rest of us haven't." Clara forced a smile, keeping her tone light. "Just trying to help where I can," she replied. "No big mystery here." Victor studied her for a moment longer before nodding slowly. "Fair enough. But if you ever need assistance, real expertise, you know where to find me." His words hung in the air like a threat, and Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Whoever Victor really was, he wasn't here for research. He was searching for the same power Arunder had warned her about. And if he discovered the talisman? That night, Clara sat by the fire, staring into the flames. The weight of her responsibility pressed down on her, heavier than ever. She thought about the villagers, unaware of the danger lurking beneath their feet. About Victor and his crew, watching her every move. About Arunder's promise to guide her, and whether she could truly trust him. For the first time since entering the cave, Clara allowed herself to cry. Not out of fear or despair, but out of sheer exhaustion. Saving Willowbrook felt like an impossible task, one she wasn't sure she was strong enough to handle. Yet deep down she knew she couldn't give up. Not yet. Not while there was still hope. As the fire crackled softly beside her, Clara made a silent vow. Whatever trials lay ahead, she would face them head on. Because if she didn't, who would? The days following the storm were unlike anything Willowbrook had ever seen. The villagers woke to find their fields lush and green again, as though the blight had never existed. Even the air felt lighter, carrying with it the crisp scent of renewal. At first, no one could explain the sudden change, least of all Clara, who kept her role in it a closely guarded secret. She walked through the village, listening to the chatter of farmers marveling at their revived crops and children laughing as they played outside. It was hard not to feel a sense of pride, knowing she'd been part of something so miraculous. But Clara knew better than to let herself relax completely. The corruption might have been sealed away for now, but the scars it left behind ran deep, not just in the land, but in the people themselves. Trust wasn't easily earned in Willowbrook, especially when strangers like Victor and his crew still lingered on the outskirts of town. They hadn't left after the storm, despite having no apparent reason to stay. Instead, they set up camp near the forest, watching the comings and goings of the villagers with unsettling interest. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were waiting for something, or someone. Victor made a point of crossing paths with her whenever possible. He'd appear at the market, leaning casually against a stall while making small talk about the weather or the quality of this year's harvest. Other times, he'd show up at the edge of the fields, jotting notes in a leather-bound book as if cataloging every detail of the land. His presence unnerved Clara, but she refused to let him see her fear. Every time he tried to engage her in conversation, she gave vague answers, careful not to reveal anything that might tip him off. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara found herself sitting by the creek, skipping stones across the water. Buttercup lounged nearby, chewing lazily on a patch of grass. For the first time in weeks, Clara allowed herself a moment of peace. The talisman was gone, yes, but its absence didn't leave her feeling empty. Instead, she felt lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had finally lifted. Arunder's words echoed in her mind, *trust in yourself, and in those who stand with you. She thought about Mrs. Thompson, who had believed her without question. Her father, who worked tirelessly to keep the farm running. Even the skeptical farmers who had eventually pitched in to help burn away the moss. Maybe strength didn't come from holding power. It came from sharing it. Her quiet reflection was interrupted by the sound of footsteps crunching through the underbrush. Clara turned to see Victor approaching, his sharp features illuminated by the fading light. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, gesturing toward the spot beside her. Clara hesitated before nodding reluctantly. "Suit yourself." Victor sat down, pulling a flask from his coat pocket and taking a long sip. "You know," he began, his tone casual but probing, "I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about the moss being toxic." "And?" Clara replied, keeping her voice steady. "Well, I did some digging literally and found traces of something unusual." He paused, studying her reaction. "Almost like the earth itself is rejecting it, like it doesn't belong here." Clara clenched her fists, forcing herself to remain calm. "Maybe it doesn't mean we need to understand everything." Victor smirked, clearly enjoying the game. "Oh, but understanding is half the battle, isn't it? Take your little charm, for example. That thing you're always clutching, it's connected to all this, isn't it?" Clara's blood ran cold. How much did he know? Had he seen her use the talisman? She met his gaze head-on, refusing to back down. "If you're looking for answers, you're wasting your time. There's nothing special about me or my charm." Victor chuckled, leaning back on his elbows. "We'll see about that." The next morning, chaos erupted in the village. Victor and his crew stormed into the square, shouting accusations and demanding access to the forest. According to them, they'd uncovered evidence of an ancient artifact hidden somewhere nearby, one capable of immense power. The villagers gathered around, murmuring among themselves as tensions rose. Clara pushed through the crowd, her heart pounding. This was exactly what she'd feared. "Enough!" Clara shouted, stepping forward. Her voice carried over the noise, silencing the crowd. "Whatever you think you're looking for, it's not here. Leave us alone." Victor's eyes narrowed as he locked onto her. "Ah, Clara, always so eager to protect your little secret. But secrets have a way of coming out, don't they?" Before Clara could respond, a loud rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. Everyone froze, staring wide-eyed as the earth cracked open near the edge of the forest. From the fissure emerged tendrils of black smoke, writhing like snakes as they spread across the land. The whispers returned, louder and angrier than ever, filling the air with their venomous hiss. "You cannot escape us." Panic broke out as the villagers scattered, screaming and running for safety. Clara stood frozen, her mind racing. Somehow, Victor's interference had awakened the corruption again, only this time it was stronger. Without the talisman, she had no idea how to fight it. Then, amidst the chaos, Arunder appeared. His form shimmered faintly, his voice cutting through the din. Clara, listen to me. You may not have the talisman, but you still carry its essence within you. Focus. Believe. Clara closed her eyes, drawing on every ounce of courage she possessed. She remembered the warmth of the talisman, the way it had guided her through impossible trials. And then she felt a spark of energy coursing through her veins, igniting a fire she didn't know she had. When she opened her eyes, they glowed faintly, mirroring the light of the orb. Raising her hands, Clara focused all her energy on the corruption. A wave of golden light surged forth, pushing back the tendrils and sealing the fissure. The whispers faded, replaced by silence. When it was over, Clara collapsed to her knees, utterly spent. Victor stared at her, his expression unreadable. Slowly, he turned and signaled for his crew to retreat. Whatever he'd hoped to find, he clearly hadn't expected this. As they disappeared into the distance, the villagers began to emerge from their hiding places, murmuring in awe. Clara looked around at the faces of her neighbors, seeing gratitude and respect where there had once been doubt. Wordlessly, she stood and walked back toward the farm, Buttercup trailing faithfully behind her. She didn't need applause or recognition. All she wanted was to rest. That night, as she gazed up at the stars, Clara felt a profound sense of peace. The battle wasn't truly over. There would always be challenges ahead, but for now, Willowbrook was safe, and she had proven to herself and to everyone else that even an ordinary farmer's daughter could rise to the occasion when it mattered most.